Hey everyone, welcome to the 339th episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have a lot of stories for you this week. We're going to be talking about Raspberry Pi getting 45 million. We've got a bunch of updates on Apple products, including the iPhone and the HomePod. We've got a roaming partnership that's going to expand the Helium IoT network. We've got also an IoT networking Inmarsat data. We've noticed something disturbing about an IoT company's support plans that we want to talk about. Facebook has new devices. We've got a new Wise product. And Kevin has tried out a brand new smart garage door opener that we're going to talk about. Plus, the launch of the Home Assistant Amber is worth mentioning. And our guest this week is Leo Simonovich, who is the head of cyber at Siemens Energy. And we're going to be talking about securing the electric grid. Yay! We'll also hear from our sponsor, Trek 10. And I think it's time to get us started. So let's kick it off with a message from another one of our sponsors. This week's sponsor is Ayla Networks. Ayla Networks is a leading provider of edge connectivity, device management, and application enablement for the IoT. Ayla enables the world's largest companies to connect any device on any cloud to any application. They can deliver the fastest time to market. It's flexible and future-proof. Plus, it allows you to increase your operational efficiencies and enhance the customer experience. For more information, please visit www.aylanetworks.com. Okay. Welcome back, Ayla. Thanks. Now, let's talk about the Raspberry Pi Foundation, and specifically the Raspberry Pi Trading Organization.
Which are two different things that I didn't realize you knew that they were two separate entities.
Yes, because this will answer the most burning question I have about this news. So the Raspberry Pi Trading Organization raised $45 million this week, and it's a big round. It values the company at $500 million. And the funding round was led by Landzone Partners and the Ezra Charitable Trust, which is actually a private charitable foundation. So I looked at this and I was like, how can you take a nonprofit and give it money like this? Not a grant, but something that's going to value the company at something that implies an exit. And the answer to this is the Raspberry Pi Foundation is still a nonprofit foundation. There's also the Raspberry Pi Trading Company, which is what actually sells the Raspberry Pis to distributors. And if you take a look at the Raspberry Pi Foundation's financials, you'll see that last year in 2020, they actually raised about 96 million pounds. And a good majority, 80-something million of that, was actually from the Raspberry Pi Trading Company. And that's who's actually selling off all those pies. So this is not nefarious. It was just like, I'm like, how does this work? Now you know.
It definitely raised an eyebrow, though, because it's like, hey, how does a nonprofit organization raise 45 million and have now a valuation of 500 million?
I think it should be valued at more.
Well, there's that too.
Investing in the future is always a good idea, and that's definitely what the Raspberry Pi Foundation does. So the reason they're doing this is because, holy cow, during COVID, people really wanted to build stuff with the Raspberry Pi, but it's actually not people like Kevin. I was going to say you and me. It's actually just people like Kevin.
Well, it's also people who want low-cost computing because they also came out with that Pi and a keyboard computer.
Oh, yeah. But it's not those people. It's actually industrial. And just to boost this with a little bit of information, last week in the newsletter, I mentioned a survey that said that there was a small cut of industrial users whose board of choice was the Raspberry Pi, and they were shipping more than 5,000 units of whatever product they had built with the Pi inside. So there's a small contingent of industrial clients, but they're shipping a lot of devices. The other thing is, I was just talking to someone at Rack Wireless this week. They actually put Pis in any of the Helium hotspots out there. We'll hear more about Helium. But so one of their challenges has been getting enough Pis manufactured. So Pis are everywhere. just in more places than you could imagine.
Yeah, I was actually on the site, the Raspberry Pi Foundation site, and looking at I was looking at their financials for 2020 because of the question, how do they raise money? But I saw a lot of interesting statistics there. Something like 37 or 38 million Pis are out in the world now. I believe they sold 7 million just last year. So these, that's not a small figure. I mean, you can sell like 50,000 or 100,000 of just about anything. But when you're getting into the millions, that's up there.
I don't know if I could sell 50,000 of anything, I'll be honest.
Oh, we could do it.
We could work something out.
Yeah.
All right. So moving from cheap computing for everyone, let's move to expensive computing for
boutique computing.
The fancy and free. iPhones. There's a lot of news here. So iOS 15 is now out into the world. And one of the stories related to this is the medical data that doctors can get. And I was actually intrigued by this because when Apple launched HealthKit way back in like 2015, it was pretty exciting because I thought it would democratize the world of health data, which is highly fragmented with lots of proprietary health record systems, right?
Mm-hmm, way too many.
But doctors, Protocol actually did a story just a few weeks ago that talked about doctors not actually using HealthKit. So I found that really interesting. And HealthKit was more for research, but still. So now Apple's still pushing this. The idea with iOS 15 is some iPhone users are going to have the option to share data from the health app directly into their electronic medical records, like those from Epic or Cerner or those companies. And they say that the doctors and the health systems are eager to use this data, but
are they?
Are they?
You would think they would. I can only speak from personal experience. My doctor doesn't really care, even though he's a techie. So we always talk tech and smart homes and all this other thing. I'm like, hey, I've got a PDF of my heart rate variability and this and that, my O2 levels. And he's like, yeah, no, that's pretty cool. He doesn't want to look at the data. He just thinks it's a cool technology.
And I think one of the challenges here is doctors don't have time to look at your raw data, right? And there's not a lot of research and control around the algorithms that companies, so in this case, Apple, changes every now and then its algorithms about how it measures things like heart rate variability. Presumably they get better. And Apple has worked with the FDA on certain of its algorithms and data gathering techniques. So like AFib is something that it's got FDA approval to detect and share with people. But other things are a little bit more research oriented and more marketing. I call it digital snake oil because it's not vetted by doctors. The algorithms are a black box. They may change them. It's a little iffy.
Adding to that, though, you're right about that, the snake oil bit. But adding to that, and I didn't know this until recently, I believe there are 3 different classes of FDA approvals for medical devices.
Oh, yes.
So when you purchase, say, an Apple Watch and you're going to measure for AFib or heart rate, whatever it might be, I don't know if they tell you what class it is. One is like a class that, yes, it's a certified medical device. A doctor would use it. It's valid, usable, et cetera. And then there's, it gives you a good indication. And then there's others like, it's good for trends. So I think there needs to be some clarity on what you're actually getting when you buy these wearable devices.
That's true. And some of them have nothing. I just want to put all of those caveats out there because I feel like there's a lot of marketing happening around health and wellness, and a lot of people are buying into it and find value into it. I think it's fine to look at trends over time to see how your health is doing. I do worry that people are going to get data and come in and be like, oh my gosh, doctor, my heart rate is like this, and I'm very concerned. I worry that there's going to be the people who are worried about their health because of this. And then the other aspect of it that we'll get to, because Apple is also working with Biogen and UCLA to evaluate how the iPhone and Apple Watch sensors could detect symptoms of dementia, depression, anxiety, and other neurological diseases. And there's a lot of effort to use things like AI to determine like how people sound and through that determine that they're depressed. There's been some research around that. But I don't know, even with Apple's much vaunted and much marketed privacy efforts, that I want my phone trying to diagnose a mental illness or a neurological illness. And I say this because I feel like we have access to this sort of thing already. The people who most need access to mental health diagnoses aren't going to be helped by the iPhone necessarily, because those people are people who are poor and can't afford mental health services. Those people may not be carrying iPhones. They're also the people most at risk with an iPhone diagnosis. A, they may not be able to get help and follow up. They may just have this information and be kind of worried about it and not know what to do with it. Or B, that information could make its way into the world and penalize them in ways that it might not penalize other people. And so I have a lot of worries about what it means to surveil people and to surveil their mental state. I know this is a study. I know this is research, but I want this sort of thing to be super transparent. I want the privacy constraints around it to be so high. And I worry so much that we're going to see other companies try to embrace this in ways that are maybe less scrupulous. I don't know how scrupulous Apple's being, and really hurt people.
All valid concerns, without a doubt. And you don't use an iPhone. I currently do. I've actually participated in several of these research studies and providing my health data. I can't remember. It's been a while since I was asked to participate in one. It's a personal choice. You have to opt in. You don't have to do it. Do you trust Apple and the researchers with the data? That's a personal choice as well. Obviously, I do, or I would not have participated. I don't know. I mean, I don't see this one being any different than the other ones that I've done.
I do. There's so much stigma around mental health. I mean, I did the Detect survey with Fitbit around like using your heart rate to detect viruses.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no problem donating my data and sharing my data for that. But sharing my data for a diagnosis of like depression or anxiety feels...
Well, yeah. I mean, maybe it feels more personal. I understand that. I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb here. This shouldn't be news to anybody who's known me for a while. I will probably take part in this study if I can. I was diagnosed with clinical depression in 2011 and I've been on medication ever since. And you're absolutely right about the stigmas, but not to get too away from the main topic, but the only way to get rid of the stigma is, in my opinion, kind of to embrace it and get it out there so that it becomes a little more normalized and it's not a thing we don't talk about. So I hear you, but, and I know not everybody who is in the same situation as me or has the same condition feels the same way. And I respect that too. That's fine.
Okay. I will confess, I too have been diagnosed with clinical depression.
Oh, this is like the Dr. Oz show now.
I know. And I feel like, I have talked about it very, very rarely. It's no secret to people who know me well. And I've even done a little Twitter thread trying to help normalize things. But I feel like the potential to market to people or to take advantage of this knowledge, it scares me because people who are depressed or who are anxious are vulnerable and we have no protections for them for this sort of thing. And maybe Apple will be okay with the data. Maybe they're not going to try to sell me things. Maybe they're not going to share that data. But this sort of research worries me because we don't have any guardrails around it. So I understand feeling secure with Apple. I don't know if I feel secure with like Amazon deploying this sort of thing as part of like Madam A.
But again, even if they did, you have a choice to use their products and services or not.
Yes, but maybe not. What if you just walk into someone's house and they have this capability, right? So if I walk into someone's house and their Madam A can detect this, I assume there will be safeguards around this, but also think about like retailers or, already voice analysis on customer service calls is being monitored for agitation, for example. And they actually tell the respondent, hey, this person's getting pissy. Let's figure out something better.
There's one key difference now that I can't guarantee in the future, but now it is not easy, or I don't think it's being done to identify me with that voice print if I walked into my friend's home.
Okay, that's true.
So all it would know is, wow, one of your friends is like seriously depressed, but who would it be, right? How does it get tagged back to me? So to me, currently, that's one protection.
And I guess another issue is if you have these devices just willy-nilly diagnosing people, and we're not there yet. This is not something that's happening. It takes time. It takes time for them to analyze so much input. Like they need more input than just like us chatting over coffee, right? But when they have these diagnoses, what do you do with it? Like if you can say to someone, wow, this person is really depressed, maybe we should tell someone, right? What are the ethical and moral things you've got to think about with that? Okay.
Yeah.
That was a heavy topic.
Ooh.
We're going to move on.
Let's talk about something happier.
Well, we're just going to talk about new features coming as part of iOS 5 that might matter for you and your HomePod. Kevin, you want to talk about them?
Yeah, well, these make me happy. The iOS software version 15, which comes to the HomePod, HomePod Mini, etc., it has a bunch of media things that we probably really don't care about, or at least not as much. But it does have some interesting Siri things that we should talk about real quick. You can now ask Siri to turn on your Apple TV, and you can have Siri start playing a favorite movie and control playback when you watch TV. So play, pause, fast forward, etc. Siri will automatically adjust its speaking level based on ambient noise in the room and volume of the user, which is very nice. A little more adaptive.
Madam A just did that. Keep going.
Yeah. And then you can have Siri control certain devices at a specific time, such as saying, and we've seen this come to other digital assistants recently as well, shut the lights off in 15 minutes, to give yourself time to get ready for bed and go upstairs or whatever. So that is very nice. Oh, and package detection for HomeKit Secure Video, which I should point out has seen a big change because the old iCloud plans are now iCloud Plus plans. So I have one, 200 gigabytes shared across my family for $3 a month. They've now changed all of these to iCloud Plus, and that means instead of being limited to a certain number of cameras with HomeKit Secure Video, which I was limited to one, I believe, for the recording, the cloud recording, it's now more cameras. You're less limited.
So. More cameras.
Yeah.
All right.
And no extra charge.
Yeah, great. Okay, here's some Helium news. In the IoT networking world, we've got news from two companies. First up, Helium. They make a LoRa network. You get to mine basically it's a people-powered distributed LoRa network that was started where you get a miner and it piggybacks on your Wi-Fi network and generates a LoRa signal that can go out a mile to multiple miles. And then they pay you in Helium network tokens. Those are exchanged if you want. They're cryptocurrency.
They pay you. They don't pay me because mine still isn't here yet.
Right. They pay me.
Sorry.
They don't pay Kevin. He's still very bitter and salty about this.
Yes, I am.
Helium has gotten so big. We're going to hear a lot of news from it in the next couple of weeks. But first news announcement that came out is that they have a roaming partnership with Senate. Senate is an LoRa network provider that has been around for years. They were in Europe. They expanded here in the US. It's deployed in over 29 states. And basically, it's carrier grade, which means it's designed for professional customers. It doesn't have the same setup like where you buy data credits as you do from Helium. But the point is now people who are on the Senate network can elect to roam onto the Helium network, which means all of Senate's customers now will be using the Helium network, which means if you're a Helium network miner person, more data transfers, yay. But broadly, this means that we're getting to a point where we're going to have the capability to have ubiquitous LoRa IoT network coverage, which is great because it's cheaper. It uses less batteries and it doesn't send a lot of data, but you don't always need a lot of data. So I'm freaking excited about this.
I would be, but
you can be excited about it because that just means like eventually when you get your Helium miner, you will be part of this.
Okay.
This glorious experiment in new economic models for coverage.
188,000 Helium hotspots are out there.
Yeah.
I would like it to be 188,001.
Right. Well, good luck. We'll have more news on that coming up in the next few weeks. Okay. Inmarsat, the satellite communications service that is almost as old as I am. Woo. They were founded in 1979. I was born in 1978. Anyway, they did a report on industrial connectivity in the time of COVID-19. Broadly speaking, they found that demand for IoT connectivity has increased because of the pandemic. We talk about this all the time. There's new demands for like social distancing, that sort of thing. Cold chain has become much more important with the vaccines. But it's also because there's an increasing effort to digitize enterprise and industrial settings because people need to be able to monitor things remotely so they don't go in. So COVID has changed a lot of things. Inmarsat has put a report together talking about some of the areas where it is obviously done the most for things that require satellite communications. Those are in electrical utilities, agriculture, mining, and transport and logistics. And 77% of respondents to their survey have deployed at least one IoT project. That is up 21% since their 2018 survey. Most of the people who haven't done anything yet are trialing it or plan to do it in the next year and a half. So that's big. It also means there's not as much room for growth, I guess, huh? The biggest driver for deploying any IoT is cost efficiencies, followed by environmental sustainability, which I was like, hot diggity. So not only is COVID-19 driving digitization, any sort of carbon reduction plan is also doing this. And I have talked to lots of companies who are trying to reduce their emissions and relying on sensors to do this. That's followed by better supply chain insight and greater automation, and then just better decision making. So, yay. When it comes to what they want to connect with, Wi-Fi is the number one connector network technology, followed by satellite, followed by just straight up radio. I don't know what kind of radio. That may be people who don't know what type of radio they have, followed by cellular.
Wi-Fi is pretty ubiquitous and inexpensive if you can get on it.
Yeah, and if you can control your network like inside a factory or inside your corporate, you've got your own Wi-Fi network that your IT system manages. So that's kind of some of the highlights here from this report. Again, they talk about like, what are you worried about? Security is always a big concern, et cetera, et cetera. But I just thought it was worth mentioning that here is yet another data point that COVID-19 has changed things, but also the data point about environmental sustainability driving adoption. And yeah. All right. Moving on to a disturbing story from the smart home. I was checking my email this week and I received something from Arlo. I have an Arlo camera system that I bought, my goodness, like 5 years ago, 4 years ago. It's been a while. And this basically was a notification letting me know that their support options have changed.
And not in a good way.
And not in a good way. Basically, if you don't have a subscription for pulling data after a certain amount of time has passed, you're not going to get to talk to people. So what they've done is if you buy these cameras, within the first 90 days of purchase, you have access to all customer support options available. After those 90 days, if you don't have a subscription plan, you will not have access to phone support or priority agent routing. You will have access to chat support, a virtual assistant, the Arlo community, the knowledge base, and manuals. But that's no plan within the 1-year warranty. So if you're under warranty, you get live chat support. But if after that year passes, you do not subscribe to a plan, you only get access to computers, the virtual assistant, the Arlo community, the knowledge base, and manuals and guides.
Yeah. So this sends a terrible, terrible message. And I hope they rethink this. And I hope other companies realize that this is not the way that they should be changing or a model they should be adopting, because something like smart home cameras, you just said you've had yours for 5 years. And granted, new models come out every year and, they get better sensors, better features, HDR, night sight, whatever it might be. But those are not devices that people upgrade on a 1, 2, probably even maybe a 3-year basis. So to have you pay for the hardware.
And it's not cheap. Arlo hardware is expensive.
No. And it's good hardware.
It's good hardware. Yeah. I used to recommend these cameras. I love them.
But after 1 year, you're out of warranty and you basically are left with no support on a device that has a much longer shelf life than that. I just think that's terrible.
It is, because the other thing about these is they're transportable. So I've moved with these cameras actually 3 times now. And each time I've managed to figure things out. But in the smart home, things are always changing. You know, if you move, you might have issues connecting, or there may be some sort of challenge, right? If you change from a Madam A to a Google integration, that might change and break things. There's a lot of opportunity for breakage here. And it feels exactly like you said, it feels like a money grab.
Listen, I'm not unsympathetic to the fact that they need to make money. They are a business and they have responsibilities here to shareholders. Certain companies do. And
IoT devices have constant costs. That is a hard thing for companies to figure out.
But it's almost like they're just finding this out. Hey, these things cost us money every month. Yeah.
So I don't like this, Arlo. I don't recommend other companies doing it. I imagine, though, that we will see this, and it makes me sad. This is very anti-consumer. I don't like it. Okay. Moving.
I don't like it.
That's my Andy Rooney moment of the show. Okay. I feel like we've had a bunch of those, actually. Let's talk about Facebook. Oh, no. Here I go. All Andy Rooney. Okay. Go, Kevin.
Yeah. I just want to disclose before we talk about Facebook that I, on a regular basis, once or twice a year, do consulting for Facebook, in particular in their connected device area.
And we don't really talk about Facebook because it's not, considered an IoT company. They actually do a lot of IoT stuff in their data centers. So their management of how both their office buildings and their data centers work, highly IoT, highly sensorfied, highly automated. It's pretty cool. But we don't really talk about it a lot on the device front because up until the sunglasses came out, they really had only had the Portal, and we just deemed those scary and moved on. But they have new portals, the Portal Go and the Portal Plus. And you want to talk about each of these, Kevin?
Yeah, well, there's some unique things here. If you already have a Portal, I don't know that you'll want to upgrade because these just really same services, same features for the most part. The big difference is in the design. They don't look like old picture frames anymore. The $199 Portal has a built-in handle and a battery, so you can actually take it with you and, use it for Bluetooth, for example, to stream music from your phone. But it is a smart display that you can leave in the home. It has Madam A support and lots of work video conferencing features, which was really what their big message was with these. They're adding more video chat features and services. And then the larger one is the Portal Plus. They got away from the rotating display that they had on the old or the original one. And it's a 14-inch tilting display. It's $349.99. Very high quality screen based on the resolution. Both of these do have the way the camera follows you with software. The camera itself doesn't follow you, but the software kind of crops in and out so you can move around, which is kind of handy. But again, most of the services they're pretty limited by comparison to, say, the Googles and the Amazon devices. So, they're trying, they're pushing workforce for this one. In fact, they're even going to offer these devices to small businesses and enterprises in a managed capacity, like people or IT departments manage fleets of computers. Mm-hmm. So they're really pushing more enterprise here, but it's certainly also a consumer device.
I would never let Facebook in my enterprise. I have an enterprise. Look at that, Kevin. You are the enterprise. Okay. And the sunglasses, I just want to mention this. We don't talk a lot about AR, VR, with the exception of like industrial stuff. You'll hear that'll change over this year, probably, as we see more devices, more capabilities, and more adoption. Not on the consumer side, probably much more on the industrial side. But they're pushing their device strategy, it feels like, as a way to push into their new markets. So Facebook is, trying to get more into the enterprise, thus these products. Facebook is trying to make the metaverse happen, thus the sunglasses.
And even the sunglasses, they partnered with Luxottica and their Ray-Ban sunglasses. There's like almost no Facebook branding on the device itself, which is actually kind of interesting to me. I think because they're trying to kind of stay away from any privacy backlash that might be associated with that. But these aren't even AR or VR. They're literally kind of like the Echo frames.
Yeah.
They just look, well, they look just like Ray-Bans because they are Ray-Bans, just slightly thicker in the arms, 2 cameras. And all you do with them is you take photos or videos with them. You can listen to music and you can use them to speak to Madam A and take phone calls. But $299, I don't see them being a big seller, but
I was like, would you buy them?
Prove me wrong.
Do you need a market? I know you tried the Echo frames, so.
For the same reason that I wouldn't buy the Echo frames, I probably wouldn't buy these. They just don't do enough for me. I already have my digital assistant on my wrist.
That's good enough for you.
It's good enough for me.
All right. Other new devices, the Wyze Cam Pan version 2. So, I always thought it was the Wyze Pan Cam. I have said that wrong my entire life.
Cam Pan.
Okay. So the Cam Pan, which is a camera that swivels around to find the source of movement and it'll follow things and
it pans.
Yeah. I was like, it's a very handy camera.
They should put that in the name.
Yeah. Why? I believe they did. So that is going to be available for $39.99. And right now, if you purchase one, you get a month free of Cam Plus, which is their subscription plan that involves like AI detection stuff for like packages and people. I also wanted to update y'all. Last week, we talked about the AI Anywhere capabilities that Wyze says it's working on as part of that fundraising round that we talked about last week. I reached out to Wyze. They built that in-house. They're not using, and this is a service that will allow you to train your cameras to recognize things on its own. It's not out yet. It's coming. And they're not using an outside partner because they were bitten last time by the Exynos issue. When Apple bought Exynos, they shut off their people recognition in the Wyze cams and everyone was sad. So they were like, you know what? We're going to do it ourselves. And thus they have. So we'll stay tuned for that because I'm really excited. And I know Kevin's really excited about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to see what I can train it. Maybe train it to my dog Norm and the cats and whatnot. Just fun stuff at first.
I feel like I want to train it to like sound an alarm after I've been reading on the couch for 30 minutes. Get up, get up.
Yeah. Real quick, the version 2 of the Cam Pan looks pretty much identical to the original version. I see 5 differences. This one has color night vision. The original does not. It also has an invisible infrared LED for grayscale night vision, which the old one has, but this presumably would be better. The motion tracking on the old one is there, but they say advanced prioritized to track on person. I guess to track people is what they mean. A slightly faster processor, and it does not work with the Wyze Sense bridge, whereas the old one does.
Oh, that's because they're going to change the Sense bridge. Everyone hated that device.
Oh, okay.
So that's the plan.
Then that's a plus.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a feature, not a bug.
Okay. And other things that Kevin is excited about. His new garage door opener. Tell us about it.
Yes. As I mentioned back in February, I have started this year to transition over to HomeKit because I don't feel I've ever given it enough love. So I just found last week a $49.99 smart garage door opener made by Miros, the people who made the dual outlet smart HomeKit outlet I reviewed 3 months ago. I installed it, the garage door opener. I replaced my big old Go Control Z-Wave opener, and this thing's much smaller. Sets up with HomeKit really nicely. I had my wife test it with her Apple Watch. She asked Siri to open the door and close the garage door, and everything worked. So all is well here in this house because we haven't had a garage door opener like that for 2 years because I got rid of my hubs. So
that's one of my favorite devices. I actually give that to like my in-laws because it's always nice. There's always someone in your life who's like, oh no, did I close the garage door? And they want to drive back and check. This is like just peace of mind and it's relatively inexpensive.
And I should add, even though I tested with HomeKit, it does work with Amazon, Google, and Samsung Smart Things. It's a Wi-Fi device, so you don't need any dongles, bridges, hubs, or anything like that. They do make an old one that does not work with HomeKit. If you're a HomeKit user, you don't want that one. So,
got it. Okay. That concludes the news portion. And now it is time for us to move to the Internet of Things podcast hotline, which is where we answer your questions on the show. You will also be entered to win a smart speaker of your choice. If you call in at the end of the month, we do a drawing. So yay. You can call us at 512-623-7424. And this week's Podcast Hotline is sponsored by Very. Very is a fully distributed IoT engineering firm that partners with clients to build systems for smart manufacturing, smart energy and utilities, consumer electronics, and connected wellness. You can discover what Very's multidisciplinary teams can do for you at verypossible.com/services. Alrighty. This week's voicemail is actually our excuse to talk about news that we didn't talk about. So it also is my favorite voicemail because it involves someone trash talking Kevin. We hear from Todd from Georgia. Let's hear it.
I have a question and a comment for Kevin. Was wanting to know, has he seen the Home Assistant's Amber board that they have got out for crowdsourcing, and will he be looking at that as a way to change from HomeKit back to Home Assistant? And also, the comment is that I hope he doesn't want to be a kicker for when Georgia Tech plays Georgia, because I really don't want to see him get hurt. And go Dogs.
So ends my collegiate football career.
So sad. Yeah. Yes, Todd,
so sad.
I love you for calling and giving Kevin a little bit of gruff. Thank you.
Yes.
I also appreciate that you asked about Home Assistant Amber. Last week, I was waiting for this as we were recording the show, and it hadn't launched yet. So I was like, oh, we can't talk about it. But now we can. And this is a follow-on to Home Assistant's first foray into hardware, which was the Home Assistant Blue that Kevin tried. So I'm going to let Kevin talk mostly about this. But it has achieved its funding goal, which means it will be produced. And Kevin, you want to talk about what Home Assistant Amber is going to do for people?
Yeah, and kind of gets us back to the beginning or the first topic. Home Assistant is software that you can run on, say, a Raspberry Pi. It takes some configuration and some installation. So not everybody jumps into the Home Assistant pool. So what is happening is first with the Home Assistant Blue and now with the Amber, these are basically all-in-one devices, just plug and play. And this is built around a Raspberry Pi Compute Module 4. And it's got all the inputs and outputs you would want on a small, I'll call it a smart home server, because that's basically what this is. And it's really for the people who don't want to do it themselves. You know, like you could do your own Raspberry Pi thing with the Home Assistant and configure and set it up, but this is for plug and play. It's $149 with a power cord. And yeah, I'm interested in it, Todd. But there is a small problem, and that is because the funding round is going now to build up the orders. I see that orders placed now for the full kit with power cord and everything else with 2 gig of RAM and a 16 gig storage drive, pre-installed Home Assistant, ships November 30th, 2022. So chip shortages, I have a feeling, are coming into play here because it's more than just a Pi. There's other things on the board.
Yeah, there's a Zigbee chip on the board that will be updated to Matter compatible for anybody who's in that camp.
It also supports OpenThread right out of the box. So like this is great if you just want to have a local control over a smart home. You have heard of Home Assistant, but you don't want to be getting into installing it, downloading it, etc. You just buy this, plug it in, configure it, and you're good to go. And there's over 1,000 devices that are supported. It's actually fairly easy to use. It's a nice system.
And Kevin will continue to use Home Assistant, but each of us run multiple things in our home. So he won't ever give up HomeKit, probably.
Oh, no. No. And you know what? Even for people who support Georgia over Georgia Tech, I'll write a review.
There you go. Okay. That concludes this portion of the show. Remember, if you would like to be featured on the hotline, give us a call at 512-623-7424. And now, stay tuned for our guest. Our guest this week is Leo Simonovich, who is the head of cyber for Siemens Energy. And we're going to be talking about, well, a new product from Siemens, but mostly about what it's going to take to secure our energy grid. But first, a word from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Trek 10. Hey everyone, we are taking a quick break from the IoT podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Trek 10, and I have Carlos Lemus, who is the IoT practice lead with Trek 10, here with us today. Why don't you tell me a little bit more about what you do at Trek 10?
We're an AWS Premier partner. And we focus on building cloud infrastructures for clients across different verticals, from manufacturing to the food industry to healthcare. We do have a unit dedicated exclusively to IoT for clients who are building smart products or connecting legacy systems or manufacturing operations to the cloud. And so we got our clients through the process of connecting their products to AWS and doing so at scale and ensuring that data flows reliably to and from their IoT devices. And then what we do is we also work with them to unlock the value of that data through activities like database selection or machine learning pipelines, integration with external services that are used for things like business intelligence and sales processing and so on.
Excellent. So what are some of the challenges that you see your clients face when undertaking IoT projects?
What we see primarily is a massive concern with reliability at scale. So what that means is when I release thousands of products, will everything work as expected? And that's because it's one thing to have a handful of devices while you're in the testing phase and you have your application work seamlessly. But it's another to have hundreds of thousands or even millions of devices and making sure that your fleet will continue to operate smoothly. Another huge concern is, of course, security. Our clients have an emphasized interest in making sure that they won't be a victim of the next cyber attack and that their device provisioning and securing strategies are up to best practices.
Okay, so then how does Trek 10 help tackle those issues?
We have experience working with our clients deploying fleets of IoT devices up to the millions in number. And that combined with our cloud engineering work done for large enterprises, we know what it takes to develop cloud native applications that will scale up with the demand from the devices in the field. So let me give you an example. We had a client who had about 20,000 devices, but they were targeting 1 million within the following 12 months. And we helped them develop a system using services like AWS IoT, Kinesis, DynamoDB, in order to be able to support their new and much larger workload. So in the same way, through a combination of capacity planning and service selection, we're able to design AWS architectures that will support your workloads in the most cost-effective way. And what's more is we pride ourselves in being an AWS Premier Partner, which is the highest level of AWS partnership, and which really means that we have proven to have numerous systems in place to ensure the highest level of security and reliability in the solutions that we design.
Excellent. So where can people go to learn more about Trek 10?
To learn more about how we can help you achieve your vision for IoT, please visit us at trek10.com/IoT podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Leo Simonovich, who is head of industrial cyber at Siemens Energy. Hello, Leo. How are you doing today?
Hi, Stacey. Good to be with you.
Oh, I am excited. Well, actually, I'm a little dismayed because this is going to be a security call, y'all, and we always feel a little bit worse about ourselves after we hear about what's happening in the cybersecurity realm. So, let's pull up our big boy pants and talk about it. So, Leo, tell me what your role is at Siemens Energy.
I lead the industrial practice at Siemens Energy. You may not know Siemens Energy as a security company, but over the last decade, we've become one. Certainly since Stuxnet, when it was our PLCs that were impacted. First, we had to get serious about product security and then secure the 400 plus factories and power plants around the world. And then we took that knowledge and built a practice focused on solving the operational technology challenge. This is one of the core problems that needs to be solved to enable the energy transition and the Internet of Things. We've been innovating in this space by bringing both services and technology hyper-focused on solving two problems: the visibility challenge to empower operators to make smarter decisions around security, and then the human capital challenge, i.e. the shortage of personnel to tackle the industrial cyber challenge.
Okay. And we're going to talk later on in the show about a new product that y'all have released to kind of address this. But before we get there, I feel like we've got to talk about a lot of other things, namely outline the problem. So let's talk a little bit about the challenges of things like ransomware.
Cyber physical attacks more generally are a real concern because of the consequences of those attacks and the kinds of impacts that they can have not only on a single asset, say a power plant or a refinery, but on a system as a whole, say our power grid. Those attacks have been increasing both in frequency and severity. And in fact, industrial cyber has become the new risk frontier. And yet, if we look at the readiness of operators to address it, many are dealing with legacy assets that are aging. Many are dealing with the push to digitize, the push to get more connected, and the push to get greener with their business models being disrupted. So the hard reality is that the gap between defenders and attackers is widening. And this is a core challenge that we urgently need to address.
I think this gap is also only going to get wider simply because we're making our energy systems two-way. So we're bringing in, I might have solar panels on my roof and feed that back into the grid, or I'm talking to companies who are building, two-way electrical breaker boxes. So what are the implications of that? Should we get even more worried?
Well, digitalization and cybersecurity are two sides of the same coin. And you're right in that intelligence is being pushed to the edge to enable our digital economy, say electric cars or smart cities. That push is creating entry points. Over the next couple of years, we will add something to the tune of 2 billion new devices to the energy system. Those digital devices are going to be smarter, and there, of course, will also greatly expand and morph the attack surface. They will allow many more entry points for bad actors to come into the electric system. On the other hand, by becoming more distributed and by introducing renewables into the system, we're also building more resilience into that system. It's about how the approach or the blueprint that we undertake to protect it. And at the core of that blueprint, of course, is the need for visibility, understanding what's happening in the environment, and the context to take some smart action in order to get faster at detecting and protecting our energy system.
And this may seem like a stupid question, but why is this so important? Talk to me about the current risks to the energy system. Like I talked to the CEO of American Electric Power 6 years ago, and he said he had moved from having a few security experts to an entire floor of them because they were constantly being attacked. So what is it like out there for the electrical industry?
It is the most attacked critical infrastructure vertical, and for good reason, because if we think about what attracts bad actors, it's profit and its ability to cause damage. And our electric grid, because of its connectivity, because of its systems approach, those attacks can start with a small part of the grid and then very quickly expand to consume large part of the delivery and production networks. So let me talk about an attack that happened in 2019 that started with a small municipal utility in Northwest United States. To illustrate the point, that attack exploited a vulnerability and very quickly cascaded to a loss of visibility for the ISO, or the entity that dispatches and delivers energy to a large part of Western United States. And it's because of that loss of visibility, we weren't sure what was happening. We didn't know if production networks were being impacted or this was a software malfunction. And that is exactly the kind of challenge that we need to address. You cannot protect what you cannot see. And many operators are blind, A, to what they have, and B, how their assets are being manipulated.
That's very common too in the healthcare space, which is another area where I'm like, oh, please, we probably need better security and visibility here. Okay. So let's talk about the types of attacks. So, one of the challenges, and you mentioned that the electrical grid is often under attack, either for profit or for malicious intent. So what kind of attacks is our grid facing?
I know we talk a lot about, nation state attacks. I know we talk a lot about geopolitics, and those are a real concern. All that's absolutely true, and operators have the right to be concerned about them. But the reality is that the cost of an attack, a piece of malware, that cost has significantly gone down. And it can be purchased on the dark web for very little money. And yet, because of all the connectivity and because of the interlinks in the system, the consequences can be devastating. So even criminal actors, take Colonial, for example, can cause havoc to major parts of the U.S. economy. And the reality is that we shut down the flow of gas to the eastern seaboard on a suspicion that there was a cyber attack impacting operational technology. It is this lack of visibility that really handicaps and impairs. It's the gray showstopper that's preventing operators from getting better and faster at responding to attackers.
So you keep coming back to visibility, and the idea is, look, you got to know you're under attack before you can do anything about it. So the steps would be to make sure you've got eyes on what's happening on your network and devices. Then the next stage would be some sort of quarantining and then mitigation, or walk me through the steps of an attack and responding to it.
Yeah, looking at networks is not enough. That gives you some visibility, but that visibility is limited because we only know that something is abnormal. We don't actually know how it's impacting the physical world, production, extraction of energy. It's important to understand how those digital commands are cascading out into production. And to do that, the approach that we really need to undertake is to monitor the physical world or the assets themselves, say the grid, a substation, a compressor station. And to do that, we have to create something we call a unified threat stream that looks at the mechanical world, that looks at the control systems, and that looks at digital networks. That approach of combining physical and digital data is very hard to do because those data streams speak fundamentally different language. And it's even harder to understand all the manipulations that would occur as a result of somebody trying to change the flow of energy into the system, because they may do it with, it may be a small change that's done over time, or it may be a large change that's done in an unusual period, say an outage of a facility.
Got it. And this is part of an ongoing trend. We've seen actually in the IT space, several companies buying some of the more OT security players, like Microsoft purchased CyberX, Cisco's done a deal with Nozomi. We're seeing a lot of movement here. And I love the idea that y'all are from the OT side, and you're coming in with a product that will kind of unify the IT and the OT side, but you're coming in from the opposite. We'll call it the OT side, as Siemens Energy. So Can you talk about EOS and what y'all are doing there with that particular platform launch?
Yeah, our aim is to empower security teams to get a better handle on what's happening in both the physical and the digital world. We just talked about the importance of looking at both sides of the divide, especially as those lines begin to blur. We also know that chief information security officers are being tasked and challenged by the need to address operational technology. And yet most of those teams, because they're not trained in control systems or mechanical, don't have the awareness or the understanding. All of that is being compounded by the pace of change of energy systems. So what we set out to do with EOS is to build the foundation for the next generation, or what we call fusion science, and to empower analysts with visibility, with context, to better understand what's happening. And we do this in three ways. The first is by creating a unified threat stream, by taking physical and digital data out of the field, out of the production environment. Secondly, our detection engine then is able to alert and contextualize what's happening, to understand, to pinpoint not only the anomaly, but what asset that anomaly is associated with, its characteristics, where it sits in the production process. And then third, we have taken decades of experience of both incidents that we've seen around the world, but also how we respond to those incidents. And we've put them into playbooks that are used as part of the guided response inserted into the workflows of EOS. This approach is unlike anything that exists in the market today. And you're right, Stacy, we've looked at this problem from a different angle. We didn't want to take the traditional approach. Many of the players that you've listed in your question have taken the IT approach. They look at networks and they try to extrapolate from those networks what's happening. That's simply not enough. And the reason we know that's not enough is because when those security teams use traditional IT tools and then go to the plant manager or the control engineer and say, hey, I see something is weird, they cannot take the next step and pinpoint the problem and get precise about the kinds of steps that need to be taken to isolate and contain a potential threat.
So with EOS, there's the network view, and then there's the device view that's pulling in data from like the control systems. And that data is not just network activity, but also how the device is behaving. And can you talk about why that might be relevant?
The reason that's important is because if we want to understand how digital commands are impacting the physical world, we want to understand how a particular device is being commanded or controlled to do something. Say a particular pressure valve that's being told to go turn on and off. Those valves may be an integral part of the power plant or a steam turbine. So their understanding is an important step, but that's also not enough. We have to look at how those devices work in concert, how they work in the production flow, both in a linear fashion, but also in a system of systems level, right? So call that a power plant. What EOS is able to do is to visualize using what Siemens originally had built is called digital twin technology, or a digital replica of the power plant, to understand the cascading effects on the system as a whole. And that's super important to understand, A, how the attacker and their pathway in how they're looking to traverse themselves through the environment. And then secondly, the kind of damage they're looking to cause.
Got it. So if I see someone, if I'm looking at a digital twin and I'm like, oh, they're hanging out on this old steam trap over here and nothing's running on that, or maybe it's a process they don't really care about, that might change my mitigation strategy to like pull that off the network, but let it run and see what happens? Or how does that kind of tie into what then you might do to mitigate the attack?
Yeah, that's right. So it's very costly and impactful to pull the plug or to shut down the plant. That's a measure of last resort. So it's important to think through the consequences and what we call the knock-on effects or what we think will happen, and then take proportionate response. Maybe the action is to do nothing. Maybe the action is to isolate particular parts of the automation highway or one of the environmental or safety systems. That kind of informed decision-making is guided in EOS by our playbooks and by the detection engine to tell you with a high degree of richness what's being manipulated and how it's being manipulated.
Got it. And the playbooks are basically like, hey, this is how electric plants run and operate. This is what's important. So it's basically codifying all the stuff that someone who has operated a production and distribution network would understand. Yes?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Siemens already monitors power plants and control systems for thousands of utilities around the world. We've taken that knowledge and we've automated it. And then we've combined it with security expertise to get better at figuring out what's happening and how bad it could be.
Okay, Leo, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I don't feel as worried as I thought I'd feel after this.
Well, thanks so much, Stacy. We have a bright future ahead of us. We just need to secure it.
And that concludes this week's episode of the Internet of Things podcast. Please join us next Thursday, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you can't get enough IoT news, I would love for you to sign up at www.stacyoniot.com for our weekly IoT newsletter, where we explain all kinds of things that we don't even get to on the show. Once again, thank you for listening, and please subscribe.